Hi, I'm Teresa from Phoenix Gate Crafts, and this video is all about yarn weights. When you're choosing yarn for a project, one of the big starting points is yarn weight. But here's the thing, not all yarn weight is the same. So here's the trick with yarn weight. Yarn weight is a range. Now, originally, from the best I can understand, yarns were made up of plies. I mean, they're still made up of plies, but the plies were originally a pretty uniform size. And the size used to be based on how many plies went into the yarn. So 2-ply was lace weight, 4-ply was fingering weight, 6-ply was sport weight, 8-ply was DK, 10-ply was worsted, 12-ply was bulky, and you just got bigger and bigger and bigger from there. And I believe Australia still uses this. And this is actually kind of the guide if you want to double up a yarn. So you want to use 2 strands together of, say, fingering weight, which is a 4-ply. You're going to get DK, which is an 8-ply. 4 plus 4 is 8. So it kind of would work that way. It doesn't quite anymore because plies are no longer uniform. Just for a little proof, this yarn, so these are plies. You can see that this yarn is made up of 4 different strands that are spun together. So this yarn, which by the way is very thick, is only 4 plies because these are thicker plies. So the way you figure out how many plies a yarn is you get a ruler. I have a handy dandy 3-sided ruler. And figuring out plies is actually very easy. So I have a handy dandy ruler. Here I have my inches right here. And you need your yarn. And what you do is you find an inch. Shoot. We'll do this one. So what you do is you hold the yarn right next to that inch marker. And you wrap around. They need to be next to each other, not overlapping. So as you can see, I have wrapped all the way around from the 1 inch to the 2 inch. And actually this is included in the 2 inch. So then what you do is you just count how many wraps you have. This is wraps per inch. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And this is 12 wraps per inch, which, according to my handy dandy little chart, 12 to 15 is a DK, or it could be a worsted, because 9 to 12. There is some room for overlap between like 2 sizes. For example, sport or baby weight is between 14 and 18, but DK weight is between 12 and 15. So there's a little bit of overlap in that. And just in case you're wondering, apparently Caron Simply Soft can be a heavier DK weight. So, understanding that, I'm going to tell you the wraps per inch for each of these, but we're actually going to talk more about the qualities. Now, I did knit up a bunch of different swatches. I was not consistent in stitch count, which will affect this a little bit, but it's more important that you see more how it behaves, because different weights of yarn behave differently. But also, different fibers behave differently. And it's a very interesting thing. The only fiber I could find consistently in all weights was wool. But wool gets expensive, especially on bigger, thicker yarns for some reason. So I wasn't willing to spend an arm and a leg on this, so most of my swatches are acrylic. One is cotton, and the others are wool, I believe. So let's start little. Let's start at size 0 lace weight yarn. As the name implies, typically you use this super thin yarn on lace projects. So of course my swatch is not in lace at all. But you can see a pretty good range of what this yarn is capable of and how friggin' tiny those goddamn stitches are. They are puny. This is double crochet. And here's the thing, lace weight is technically 2 different sizes. You have regular lace weight, which is the thicker one. You also have cobweb yarn, which is the other one. And as you can see, they are different thicknesses. This one is twice the thickness of this one. Cobweb yarn is really fine and delicate and really hard to handle, honestly. A lot of people who have arthritis tend not to like the lighter weight yarns just because they can be a little difficult to grip. But as you can see, this is like 40 stitches across. It's small. This isn't even. This is 40 stitches. And it's just over 4 inches. It is 30 to 40 wraps per inch for lace weight. And honestly, it could probably go higher, especially if you're using a cobweb. This stuff is thin and crazy. And yes, that was wool. The next one is fingering. And as you can see, this is quite a bit thicker. By the way, I am still sick, so I apologize for any yucky sounds you might hear. My voice is getting a little rough. But as you can see, these are still very fine. This is fingering weight, number 1 size, and it is 18 to 30 wraps per inch. And I think I used a size 2 knitting needle here. Now, there is some confusion with fingering weight because sometimes it is called sock weight yarn. And here's the thing. Most often, socks are made out of fingering weight. But socks do not have to be made out of fingering weight yarn. And just because a yarn is fingering weight does not mean that it is good for making socks. A true sock yarn is based on the fiber content, which is typically, traditionally, 70 to 75% merino wool, often superwash, and 25 to 30% nylon or another fiber for strengthening. And that is not necessarily all that a sock yarn could be. This yarn could not be a sock yarn because it is 100% merino wool. It is not superwash. This yarn would felt like crazy, and it's very soft and very delicate. I would not use this particular yarn, which I believe was Capretta, and it's slightly thicker. You see the difference. There's quite a bit of difference. And this one I think is more like 30 stitches. It's not 40. We'll leave this one here so we can compare to the next one, which is sport weight yarn. Sport is number 2 weight, and it is 14 to 18 wraps per inch. And again, you can see that we're just getting a little bit bigger. Now this one looks quite a bit different in terms of tension and everything from this one, and that's because this one is cotton. And you can see how they kind of drape and behave differently. Wool has a lot of structure. Cotton is a little bit more drapey. So they will still behave differently based on the size. Now we'll leave this one here. Real quick, sport weight is also called baby weight sometimes because a lot of baby garments are made in sport weight. Though, again, not all baby garments and stuff is made in sport. I made a child size sweater in fingering weight, so, there's variation. But the next is number 3, DK or light worsted weight. And as you see, we're getting bigger again. DK is 12 to 15 reps per inch. Can't remember if I said that already. And it's getting even bigger. And now we're into the firm acrylic, which as you can see, even has a different drape. Though different acrylics have different finishes, so they can feel different. This one feels stiffer than this one. Next is worsted, or as my husband likes to call it, the worstest. Worsted weight is 9 to 12 reps per inch. But here's the thing, it can be, depending on where you are, split into 2 categories. Now, it could be worsted and heavy worsted. I don't know why I'm indicating that. That is light worsted / DK. If you're in the United States, worsted and heavy worsted are both the same size category. But if you're in the UK and a few other places, you can have an additional category that overlaps heavily with this category called Aran, which is a heavy worsted. And that is basically just slightly thicker end of the worsted weight spectrum, by my understanding. I could be wrong, you never know. But if you ever get here in the United States, I Love This Yarn by Hobby Lobby. That is a pretty solid Aran weight. Actually, it is very thick. That is kind of like 9 to 8 reps per inch. It's not nearly as many. And as you can see, these are both acrylic. And it drapes a little differently than this because this is thicker. This will always be thicker because the yarn is thicker. Because that's what weight is. It's yarn thickness. Not sure if I made that clear at the beginning. So next is number 5, chunky or bulky weight yarn, which is 6 to 9 reps per inch. So as you can see, this is thicker. And here's the thing, this has a very different finish than this. This is a little bit more drapey than this one is. But it's still thicker and it still behaves differently. And the thickest. Number 6, super chunky or super bulky. Well, I should be more correct in saying this is the thickest I have to show you. Sometimes this can also be considered light roving. And this is the thickest one. And just so you know, I use the recommended needle and hook for all of these. And this one has basically no drape. This is nothing but structure compared to this, which still has some drape. Now, here's the thing. This is not the biggest size. There's a size 7, which is jumbo or roving yarn. And there's no limit on the size 7. This could be the super thick yarn that you do the hand knitting with, where you do the loops and you pull loops through with your hands. So anything bigger than this is basically going to be number 7 jumbo. And I didn't bother getting any of that because, sky's the limit on how big that can be. Now here's the thing. As you saw, this one does not drape for crap. But that has a lot to do with the needle size that I used. Now I don't have a sample of this in a different needle size, but I do have a lighter weight yarn that I knitted in the same size needles that I used on this. This is a size 3 DK. And oh my gosh, look at this drape. This is acrylic. This is acrylic. This is super soft. This is Bernat Softy Baby. And just see how this, behaves differently on this super thick needle. This is, shoot, I don't even remember. This is a 9mm. This has no structure to it. It just falls and drapes. This yarn is the same size-wise as this, but this was used on an appropriate needle. It has a different structure. And further, material matters. This is a cardigan I almost never wear because it's 100% alpaca. And look at this lovely material. It drapes and it feels soft like butter. But this is acrylic. These are about the same size, but this fabric being alpaca and this being acrylic, you can see how they behave just so differently, like this versus this. Like, they don't dangle the same way. Just because a particular weight is recommended does not mean that that weight in a different yarn is going to work exactly the same, because weight is a range. So if you're using a thicker yarn that's still within the same weight range, but it's a different fiber, it could behave very differently and have a different needle requirement. Which is why, if you're ever unsure about a fiber or a yarn, you should do a gauge swatch. I know nobody likes hearing that because it always feels like it's just one extra step. But it is the way to make sure you are getting the fabric you want. I do have a whole other video on gauge that I will link, but I think my real point is that knitting is an art, crochet is an art, Tunisian crochet is an art, and the yarn you use will behave differently, but this can be utilized by having a combination of what fiber you're using, the needles you're using, the yarn weight that you're using, and even the colors that you're using. All of these things can be put together in different ways to make a garment look different or the same. And these are all factors that should be considered when you're choosing a yarn. Anyway, I hope you found this handy. Happy crafting! Bye.